Greetings and good Friday morning. It is March 18th, the day after St. Patrick's Day in the year 2022, coming to you from southeastern coastal Carolina where it is just below 50 degrees, so it's a little crisp out there. Once again, I always like to point out that it's the third decade of the 21st century because if you're familiar with my channel, then you know that I always appreciate the fact that people projected we would be doing these things and that we would be talking about these topics and that we would be so far ahead in certain areas. And in many ways we are, just not to the extent people had predicted. And in some ways I feel as though we're digressing. All of which kind of comes to the point of why I made this channel. I believe that we don't necessarily have to be told what to think or what to believe. We don't have to divide ourselves into camps. We can have our own individual thoughts. We can have our own individual beliefs, and yet we can still disagree with one another, but treat each other kindly, treat each other humanely, whatever. We don't have to necessarily like each other, but recognize each other as, active participants in a rational society, productive members of a rational society, all these different things. The bottom line is, it became my assertion and my assumption that the media, which is privately funded, which means by virtue of being privately funded, has the freedom guaranteed to them by the First Amendment in the United States of America to report stories in a manner and in a fashion that ultimately supports their socio-political view of things. That wasn't necessarily how the Constitution was framed, and that wasn't exactly how it was meant to be, but ultimately that is the truth. In order to prevent propaganda, in order to prevent governmental control and ultimately dictatorships and tyranny, we have freedom of the press, freedom of speech. So the solution becomes the problem. Because they're privately funded, if they have their own personal socio-political beliefs or socio-political leanings, they are free to report things in a manner that could ultimately support their own conclusions. And that had an awful lot to do with this channel. And as is such with my channel, if you leave a comment, if you in your own special way get involved in the conversation, I will respond. So without further ado, Staci Herbold. Staci, I apologize. I want to say you're coming out of Australia, if I remember that correctly. If not, feel free to comment and correct me. But Staci Herbold responded to my video titled "Responding to Comments from Joss Whedon and Jensen Ackles, Is It Really What It Is?" Staci, I believe you declared yourself in the feminine. I want to say you declared yourself as being married to a husband, and also this video that I made was in direct response to you and then somebody else named Bill Kahn. I made sure to rewatch the video and understood what you were commenting on. So you left 3 points, and here's your first point. I am a strong defender of the First Amendment, especially defending those I disagree with. If those that I don't agree with lose their voice because I didn't defend their right, I have fought for nothing. It's interesting. Voltaire has a very infamous quote. I looked it up, and according to the Google search I did, Voltaire's quote is this: "I detest what you write, but I would give my life to make it possible for you to continue to write." So basically, you cannot have freedom of speech, all right, the freedom of the press, the freedom to express yourself, and then have that freedom revoked just because somebody dislikes it. And not to get off topic, but that goes into that whole subject of hate speech. Well, hate speech does and yet doesn't exist. There is speech that can be hateful, but within the Constitution of the United States and within our own laws, we don't have hate speech. We have speech that people can personally determine to be hateful, and you can dislike it, but technically speaking, in accordance with the freedom of the press and freedom of speech, you can say whatever you want, just people don't have to like it. And you're right, how else are we going to know whether we agree with somebody or disagree or like or dislike somebody unless they express themselves? Number 2, I completely agree. It's all the way around that we as humans should be held not only accountable for our actions, but should hold empathy. I think of the golden rule. Okay. And then number 3, I fear that there is a bias in all media who have a monetary investment. I tend to catch the BBC for U.S. news, as it seems most news outlets lean one way or another. I do enjoy your approach in regard to what you hope to have come across in your videos. Thank you for your response. Staci, not a problem. And, you know, this all goes back to a video I made January 21st. Jensen Ackles and Joss Whedon, is it really what it is? You know, are we getting all the facts? Are we formulating our opinions based on 100% truth? You know, it was just... The video itself, while intending to stimulate some conversation, it got way more attention than I anticipated. I mean, I've made numerous videos in direct response to, I don't want to say fallout, but, you know, additional comments. I've had Zoom calls with new subscribers, Miss Sheila K. And the most recent video I posted, I think from Wednesday, I discussed how bias has a big part to play, and sometimes, in spite of how rational we are, in spite of how objective we try to be, I believe our bias can interfere. I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, but Miss Sheila K. did declare that she has bias, and I think, in my own personal opinion, I don't know if anybody else got it, but if you watch our conversation, based on her academic, professional, and personal experiences, it has left an indelible mark on her. You know, it has impacted her significantly to where it creates a tremendous amount of bias. And equally and opposite, I had a very unique situation where I was accused of something. In my heart of hearts, I don't believe I did, but, you know, the one thing I did learn, at least from my perspective, and I'm not saying my perspective is right, all I'm saying is from my perspective, the people that accused me struck first. And because they struck first, they were able to establish it as fact and or truth, and it was up to me to defend it, you know, and deal with it. And basically, there were some adverse consequences. They were not as dire as they could have been, but it came at a point in my life when I was also dealing with the tragedy of just having lost a child. So as I'm trying to put my life back together, as I'm trying to move on, as I'm trying to catch up to the normal speed of life, you know, these allegations come. There were 3. 2 of them were immediately dismissed, one of which, due to the nature of the allegation, whether it was true or false, it had to be taken with severe interest. I'm probably butchering this. Basically, I was accused of sexual harassment because a woman claiming to be a lesbian came out of the closet and told me she was a lesbian. I'm assuming she was attempting to elicit some sort of response, kind of like, "What you gonna do now?" And I just flat out told her I didn't care. You know, she's required to show up on time, which has nothing to do with sexual preference. She's required to be in a clean and appropriate uniform due to the job we held at the time, which has nothing to do with sexual preference. We did have a mild grooming standard at the time, so as a woman, she had to groom herself accordingly. And look, if you want to get into the whole pronoun debate and all that, that's up to you. Which, again, has nothing to do with her sexual preference. So at the end of the day, I just told her, I don't care. I just need you to show up on time in a clean, neat uniform, you know, in proper appearance, and I just need you to do your job. And then she commented, "Well, you were in the military," so I was like, "Yeah, well, you know, even in the military, there are certain tasks, certain requirements to just, you know, earn your basic paycheck that sexual preference has nothing to do with." So, long story short, some other events happened, and I think she was attempting to strike first to basically discredit me before I had a chance to do anything, which I wasn't planning on doing. She had essentially misconducted herself on the job. Nothing horrible, just she disappeared for a significant amount of time and nobody could get a hold of her. And, you know, she had something she was dealing with, and I was like, "Hey, look, in the future, You let me know you got to deal with something. At least I know, and I can cover you. At this point, I couldn't cover you because I had no idea where you were, what you were doing, or what you were dealing with. And to me, I thought nothing of it. And then apparently she got with two of her friends and they made accusations. And I was removed from my position. I was essentially laid off for the better part of 3 weeks. But because two of the allegations were dismissed, and her allegation of sexual harassment couldn't be dismissed, but it couldn't be proven, all they could do was remove me from that position to avoid future allegations. As a company, they had to worry about their bottom line. So since I'd already been accused of something, they removed me. And like I said, I was already dealing with one thing, so it was horrific. I don't think they handled it as best they could. I feel as though they should have done a better investigation, because as it would prove later, within a couple of months, that same young woman would eventually get fired for her own piss poor performance and her own piss poor conduct. Whether that justifies my assertion that, she was immature, she was whatever, it goes back to a bigger question, which is, between her and her two friends, what was their checkmate? What was their ultimate chess move? What was their end goal? Did they really think through the consequences of their actions? Did they think about the timing, or was it just pure selfishness? And that factors into how I see the world. That factors into how I approach everything. These people that are making accusations of Joss Whedon. What do you want? I'm not saying Joss is right. I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not saying he's innocent. Like Sheila, leaning on her experience, whether she was the accuser or she was an advocate for the accused, in our discussion, she took on the position of the advocate for the accused, or in her terms, the victims. And I was advocating for the accuser just because of I was advocating for the accused. She was advocating for the accusers. Oh, God. Anyways, just because of my own experiences. So, asking questions like, what's desired end result? What is the desired final product? What are they trying to accomplish? Okay, do you just not want to work for him anymore? Well, you can actively choose not to work for him anymore. Do you want to see him canceled out of Hollywood and no longer create stories for other people to portray, thus providing them with the opportunity to work in the same industry you're in? And I'm not trying to slander anybody. I'm not trying to mischaracterize specifically Ray Fisher. All right, I'm not trying to slander or mischaracterize or accuse Charisma Carpenter of anything, or Amber Benson, or Michelle Trachtenberg. All right, these are people who spoke out against, or Gal Gadot. These are people who spoke out against Joss Whedon. And between that and the Vulture article, that gave Miss Sheila enough evidence on top of her own experiences and her personal bias to advocate for the accusers. And all I was attempting to do was ask questions as far as, based on my own experiences, are we even allowed to ask questions? Or because people are saying this and the media is reporting it, it's automatically 100% truth. And I do apologize for my camera because my hand's probably going to be blurry. But do we have to accept it as 100% truth? Is there no nuance? Are we not allowed to ask questions? Are we supposed to deify and martyr the accusers? I'm just asking questions. And I feel as though my channel's not big enough. I feel as though my personality is not big enough. I feel as though on the grand scale of things, I'm not big enough to bring any kind of anger or any kind of negative anything to the situation. They're just questions. Because at the end of the day, could Charisma and Joss have had an awkward relationship, in which case, due to the awkwardness, she sees things one way and he sees things another? Could that be true? Sure. Could it still mean that at the end of the day, based on her perception of the facts, he's a monster? Absolutely. Could other people have perceived the exact same thing, like, wow, he was good to these people, but he was absolute garbage to you? Absolutely. Could he and Ray Fisher have had a bad relationship? Absolutely. Could Ray have been treated differently than other cast members on the set because he and Josh were conflicting? Absolutely. Same with Gal Gadot. Absolutely. In which case, I was just asking the simple questions: is are these individual circumstances where yes, a group, a couple of individuals here and there come together and try to make it a common denominator, Joss bad, or like when you make your way through life, all right, people are going to agree and disagree with you. If those people who disagree with you form together, yes, then it makes it look like the common denominator is you. And these are just questions I'm asking, all right? Is Joss really the devil incarnate? Is Joss really this bad person? Or are these people who had, bad interactions with Joss? And then I go further. Was Joss potentially under a lot of stress? Was there any number of things going on? And I apologize if people think that I'm attempting to overly defend Joss. I'm just trying to ask questions if there's other possible scenarios, if there's other possible circumstances, because of my personal distrust in the media and my own personal experiences with having been accused and so on and so forth. And this topic of conversation has really kind of spiraled into something I wasn't anticipating. But if it helps get the conversation started, if it helps bring people to the table to start having conversations about nuance and whether or not, we should we should take advantage of the era where with the internet, with Twitter, with Instagram, with all these different things, and like Staci was saying, accountability, empathy, all these things, because people are out there saying things about Joss, for what purpose? What is the end state? What is the goal? At least Charisma Carpenter was on the Michael Rosenbaum podcast, and she basically elaborated on what she was trying to do. She's like, look, I had this experience. I really wanted to get it off my chest because of how it's been affecting me for years, where all these people were deifying Joss, and I didn't see him that way. This was the relationship I had. These were the circumstances. These are my feelings. She made it very clear of how internal it was, and she also made it very clear that she was attempting to advocate for Ray that, yes, not everybody who interacts with Joss Whedon is going to have a phenomenal experience. That Joss, if you're just not on his good side, he can be cruel. And I commend her for the way she presented the information. And I apologize, not that she would ever be familiar with me or my channel, and I apologize for somehow I heard something to the effect that she said, don't question anything. Let people make their accusations and don't question it. Don't question their motives. Don't question anything. Just let them say it. And apparently she never said that, but for some reason I got it in my head that she did. And thankfully Miss Sheila called me out on it. But I've been going for 18 minutes now. And once again, Staci, thank you for getting involved in the conversation. Thank you for leaving your comment. And hopefully I can come up with new stuff. I'm hoping Miss Sheila and I will get together and talk about Supernatural, because on one hand, it's really fun to nerd out about content that I enjoy with another person. And two, it's also really fun to take a break from the socio-politically charged stuff that I had originally started my channel on, because if you focus on it for too long, you end up getting miserable. If you have a thought or an opinion or feel a certain way about something, and all you're doing is watching content or immersing yourself in content and creating content, about that stuff, I've learned that all it really does is aggravate you, and all it really does is, it kind of like pollutes you, if you know what I mean. So, again, I appreciate people getting involved. I appreciate you participating in the conversation. So let's continue it. Let's keep the conversations going. If you want to do Zoom, we can absolutely Zoom. If you enjoy leaving the comments and having me respond in video form, then absolutely, we can continue to do that. Either way, however you get involved, I appreciate it, and you're awesome.